Hello everyone. Today we have a portable soldering iron from the company GVDA on review. This soldering iron is positioned as a sports car among all soldering irons. This is a novelty from the company. In a cardboard package, we are greeted by a rich set. Here we have flexible clamps, the third hand. Next, a box with the soldering iron itself. Everything is made in white. On the reverse side we have written the characteristics that the soldering iron has a toilet display, works from 5 to 20 volts, also maintains a temperature from 80 to 420 degrees, which can be smoothly adjusted. And also in the kit we have replaceable stingers of different shapes. For stingers in a separate box of various configurations. Here we have a branded soldering iron stand in a box, flexible clamps are wound on it, and below is the third hand in the people. This stand is assembled as simply as possible. Inside there is a sponge for cleaning the soldering iron tip. We have a power supply unit in a large cardboard box. This is a 65-watt power supply with a power delivery connector. This is a TypeC that outputs 20 volts of voltage and also has a regular USB connector. Let's take the flexible clips of the third hand out of the box, look at them, collect all this in a pile. In general, in fact, this thing is quite useless, since the stand is very light. If you pinch the board into it and try to solder, all this rides on the table, tries to tip over. In general, such an idea. In theory, of course, this stand can be glued or drilled, clamped with screws, but it still won't do much good, since the flexible joints are quite soft. All this will bend, miss. Well, maybe in some situations, of course, it will come in handy, but I always use my own hands and I practically don't need a third hand. We also have crocodiles that are wound on top. Well, the third stand. The hand is basically ready. As we can see, all of it is liquid, flimsy, not particularly useful. Let's get down to the soldering iron itself. We open the box and see our beautiful soldering iron and instructions. Instructions in Chinese and English. Unfortunately, the Russian was never delivered. Maybe someday it will appear. The soldering iron itself is compact, quite light. The company's logo is emblazoned. On the reverse side there is a TypeC connector, and in front there is a sting, respectively. The sting is fixed with a nut. After unscrewing the nut, you can pull out the sting itself, change it to another. All this is inserted and fixed with a nut. Let's see what's inside the soldering iron box. We open it and see a bunch of nice things inside. In this box we have such a simple stand for a soldering iron, which is quite enough. And this third liquid hand is absolutely not needed. There is also a long and very flexible USB cable that supports power delivery, 20 volts of charging. At the ends we have protective caps, which we immediately remove and throw away. And we also have a box. Judging by the drawing, we have it soldered. And indeed, inside we have a small flask with solder. There is a hole in the lid where you need to push our solder and then pull it out as necessary. The solder itself is unknown of what quality, it is unknown at how many degrees it melts. The Chinese did not consider it necessary to specify the melting point of the solder. Well, as a nice bonus for the starter pack, it's still nice. Let's try to connect our soldering iron. We insert the cable into the block, no matter which side. And turn on our soldering iron. The logo lights up and there is an animation on the OLED display asking us to press our left button. When the button is pressed, instant heating occurs from 20 degrees to 300. Literally 3 seconds and the soldering iron reached the operating temperature. On the left side, our soldering iron displays that it receives 20 volts of power. The set temperature is on the right side, and the load indication scale is on top. The soldering iron is very powerful, heats up very quickly. We have 2 keys. Left, right adjust the heating temperature. We can see that the minimum is 80, the maximum is 420 degrees. All this is exposed. Of course, I did not read the instructions. Instructions for weaklings. And now, using the poke method, we will try to find the menu, look at the settings. Hold down the left key, hold, nothing happens. If you press and hold the right key or the soldering iron goes into sleep mode. He turned off, fell asleep and again offers to turn it on. Turns on with the left key. We try to hold down the left key. Nothing happens when holding, the temperature is adjusted with a short press. After a while, it dawned on me how to get into the menu. We press 2 keys at the same time and we get into the menu. The menu is simple, only 12 items. Here we can choose the language Russian. They didn't bring Russian, only English, Chinese. In English, in principle, everything is clear. In the menu, we can set the sleep time to sleep time. That is, after what time, after how many seconds the soldering iron will turn off to sleep. And also standby time. This is the time when the soldering iron is in standby mode, that is, there in 20 to 30 seconds it will go into standby mode and will be ready to turn on at any moment if you pick it up. Also in the menu we have a display of voltage and current temperature. There is a firmware version, that is, it will be updated periodically and it will be possible to flash a soldering iron with new updates. Some chips will be delivered. Maybe even the Russian language will appear over time. I put the soldering iron on the stand, wait for how long it will go into sleep mode. He couldn't sleep for too long, so he decided to reduce the time at which he would switch to sleep mode. Sleep time was set for 10 seconds, standby also for 10 seconds. We put it back on the stand and wait for our 10 seconds. As we can see, after 10 seconds the soldering iron switched to the slip mode and the sting began to cool down slowly. If you pick it up, he asks you to press the left key to turn on the heating. We pressed the key and the stinger warmed up, again to the set temperature of 300 degrees. Let's try to wait until he goes into sleep mode and pick him up again. Here he fell asleep, we take him in hand and he automatically woke up. We wait again for 10 seconds. The soldering iron fell asleep again and began to cool down slowly. We take his hands, he wakes up automatically and starts warming up. We also have 4 replaceable stingers for various needs, thin, thick, with a bevel. Also on the seller's store there are other types of stingers with other tips, which can be purchased separately. Each sting has its own marking. The sting has a special coating that is easy to tin and does not burn. Well, let's try to solder a little, see how he solders. We bring it to the capacitor, literally a couple of seconds the capacitor was soldered out. The soldering iron does not strain at all. Let's try something more massive, such as a USB connector. When warming up, we see that the power scale practically does not grow, literally there are 2 or 3%. That is, it is a very light load for a soldering iron. If you lean against the stand, we also see that the power scale is growing a little, but within reason, it does not even reach half. Contact pads also easily melts and tinkles. Let's take something more serious, for example, the battery 18650. Everyone knows perfectly well that it has a large heat capacity when soldering, and we can see that the soldering iron easily copes, while the power again does not even reach 50%. That is, for a soldering iron, it is a very simple task to solder our battery 18650. Everything will appear without problems, the solder melts quickly and you can easily tin even such massive pieces. Next, let's try to power our soldering iron from the power bank. Power bank is very cheap, Chinese. There is no fast charging here. It outputs 5 volts to 1 ampere. We connect, the soldering iron turned on, offers to press the button to turn on. We see that we have 100% power scale and he is trying to heat up the sting. Also on the left there is an indication that 5 volts are connected. The sting is heating up, but very slowly, just about a degree per second, even longer, probably a degree in 3 seconds. In principle, if you wait 10 to 15 minutes, then the soldering iron should reach the operating temperature. Soldering will certainly be inconvenient, most likely the sting will cool down quickly. Massive objects of some kind, they probably won't be soldered, but somewhere in Spartan conditions, some small wiring can be soldered without having an outlet and normal charging at hand. That is, from an ordinary Chinese power bank. All this, though very immediately, but it works. At the same time, the soldering iron is constantly trying to go into sleep mode. He needs to be constantly shaken so that he does not fall asleep. Well, or in the settings, set the time of falling asleep longer, more. I set the sleep time more so that he wouldn't fall asleep every 10 seconds. And after some time, it has already gained 183 degrees. And you can even try to melt the solder. As we can see, the solder melts, the temperature is 187 degrees. Slowly it grows, you need to wait longer of course, but the scheme is working. From 5 volts, he also warmed up the sting, the solder melts. Now let's try to power our soldering iron from mains charging, from the mains unit already with support for fast charging, but not power delivery. We take a regular phone charging with quick charge support and connect our soldering iron via USB tester. Let's see how it behaves. The soldering iron turned on without any problems. Look, the load has started to grow. The USB tester shows us 12 volts of fast charging, almost 2 amps. And the soldering iron itself also tells us that 12 volts come to it, and naturally it is much more cheerful. It began to warm up faster. We can already see 300 degrees set. Everything works fine on such a simple block without any problems. the soldering iron will work, solder, and it is already quite comfortable to work with it here. Let's try to solder the battery 18650. We see that the load immediately increased to 100%, that is, it is certainly too heavy for him on this block, but he copes, in principle, melts. The temperature certainly drops a little. And let's try to take the cheapest simple 5-volt power supply for phones, without support for fast charging. It's just 5 volts. The Chinese say that he can give out 2 amps, but in fact 1 ampere is the maximum most likely that he will be able to master. We turn on the soldering iron, we see that the heating has started. According to the USB tester, we see that the voltage has sunk a lot, it has sunk to 4 and 6 volts, and it does not even gain 1 ampere, this block. Again, as in the case of the power bank, the heating is very slow, very sluggish, and there is no special difference that from a cheap power bank to feed that from such a cloud. That is, in some extreme cases, in principle, it is possible to solder something. Let's try to clamp the board in our third hand in the clamp. The fee itself has to be held with your hands as a result. That is, this third hand is an absolutely useless thing. If you don't hold it with your hands, everything starts to ride, slip, bend. So you see, I took my hand away and it's all rolling around the table. Even if you fix the stand, I think the situation will not get much better. The clamps themselves are very soft, they bend. In general, of course, it's fun to solder with this third hand. The optocoupler was unsealed from the charger board without any problems. Everyone.